Hi, everybody. Craig Campbell here from NerdBurger Games to talk a little bit about something that was suggested by one of my Patreon patrons, which is how do you get the artist to do what it is you want them to do? And in role playing games, that's referred to as art direction. You will look on the inside cover or inside the credits of various games, and you might see art director called out specifically as a role. Sometimes the designer is also the art director, particularly for very small games from very small companies. That's the case with me. I do the art direction myself. You can hire somebody to do art direction. You can have somebody else that is working on graphics or something to do art direction. But that's basically art direction is getting the artist, conveying the information to the artist so that the artist is providing the artwork that you want to correctly represent the game, to provide the feel of the game, to kind of look like everything you need it to look like. So basically, what that comes down to is developing a relationship with the artist and then providing specific information as part of the contract. So you have your contract with your artist or artists, and I will often refer to just one artist here as we're talking, because for the last couple projects I've been doing, I've had just the one artist. So, but this also, this goes for what, if you have multiple artists, you'll be conveying this type of information to everybody. You've got your contract that defines how many pieces of work they're doing. And what the pay rate is, what the deadlines are, the schedule of payments, all that sort of thing, the deliverables, what kind of files they're giving you, whether you own the artwork outright or whether you are licensing it from them and they essentially own it and you can use it for your game, however that works. When you get to the art direction itself, in my case, I have what's called Exhibit A here, which is attached to the end of the contract, and it's got the title of the game and a tentative release date and a description of the work, and then there's an overview of a handful of things that are kind of general notes for the artist to keep in mind. One is that the artist provides concept sketches to begin with and doesn't go straight into line work and actual inked line work, as we call it, whether this is digital or whether the artist is working with their hands with actual pens or paintbrushes or the like. I'm going to refer to sketching, and then there's inks, which is when you get the lines kind of locked in, and then color. Or in the case of black and white grayscale kind of artwork, your color phase is to put all that grayscale and texture and those types of things in there. So you definitely want to get a sketch level beforehand, even if it's just really rudimentary kind of thumbnail sketches, so you get a sense of how the individual illustrations are being arranged, what the kind of viewpoint is, what you're looking at, and to get a sense of that the artist has paid attention to the art order for each of the individual pieces of arts. Because if the sketch looks nothing like what you described, there might be a break in the communication, so you might have to discuss things more. My general overview here also covers information about white and male characters and trying not to have too many of them in the game book. There are some that had to be because they're based on historical figures. This is the art order for capers, but and I went into talking about how there should be figures of other ethnicities, and there should be female or non-male characters in general. I have a note here on backer likenesses because I did have some backer levels that involve people getting their likeness in an illustration, and so we had to make sure that they understood that if they have very modern tattoos that are visible or piercings that are kind of not appropriate to the 1920s, that we would be modifying things. We might modify facial hair, we might modify hairstyles to make it look like a 1920s game. And then I also made a note here that I provided reference photos for 1920s fashion, vehicles, street scenes, etc. And that's something I did for the artists. Is I dug up a bunch of stuff that kind of like, here's 1920s stuff. Here's what I kind of expect this artwork to look like. And then it's when you get into the art order itself, it's really just a very organized version of something that you might have had just in a conversation with an artist about doing one piece. Like if you had an artist like draw a logo for you or do a little avatar for you or something like that, where it's describing what each of the pieces looks like. The level of detail that you get into is largely dependent on you as the art director and what you want to achieve. If you want a very strict definition of every piece of artwork, you can do that. Artists will, they're working for money, so they will do the job. Hopefully, if the artist is reputable and does a good job. I try to avoid getting too detailed. I give the general overview of what the artwork is supposed to look like. Only specify those things that I feel are truly important, and then let the artist fill in the blanks and make the artwork kind of theirs. I want them to feel like they own it. That's like the artwork is like they're helping to create the world, and they're not just doing a job. So, just as an example, if you know the Capers book, you'll see some of these art orders reflected in the illustrations that are in the game, in the book. One here is just called Speakeasy, and it just describes, these figures should be of varying genders and races and ethnicities, depict as many as reasonably fit the illustration. The speakeasy should be basic, not fancy, but not looking like a shed. The room should be busy. Show figures drinking and conversing, include a character in a wheelchair, look at historic wheelchairs for reference. Not all men should be in suits. Some can be in striped jackets with newsboy or straw boater hats. It's just basically a big half-page illustration depicting a bunch of people in a speakeasy. Because the game is about prohibition, so I wanted a shot of like everybody drinking. Then I defined specifically, this is a half-page color piece in a horizontal orientation, 7 inches wide, 4.5 inches tall, 600 DPI, TIFF format, CMYK color space. Do not include a border. And to just to hit a few of these things is like there's a question of how big the illustration you want it to be. That's important. And not just a general information. Like if you know how wide your columns are, if you know how wide it's going to be from gutter to gutter, then you can give very specific dimensions. You want a DPI in there. I actually overshot here. Color is probably good at 300 DPI. I had 600 in here. In projects since then, I've done color. I've called for color work to be at 300 DPI because these files just get to be really, really big. It's a TIFF format so that it's a nice clean. It's not compressed. And CMYK color space is important because for me, the print-on-demand work is being done through Drive-Thru-RPG and their partner, and they require everything to be kind of built into CMYK color space as opposed to RGB. So all of this information kind of needs to be modified to what you need. So if you're doing an offset print run, or if you're just doing PDF, or if you're doing print on demand, look at the requirements or for what's ideal for those different media, and hit that information. If when worse comes to worse, overshoot just in case. I'm only going to do a PDF. But maybe you want to just cover yourself and say, I'll prepare it in such a way that I can do print on demand if I need to. So I'll ask for these more stringent requirements. So that's just like kind of a basic rundown of an illustration. I had in this case I had 5 half-page illustrations. I had a whole bunch of quarter-page illustrations after that. At this point, a bunch of illustrations had already been done for the Kickstarter. So I was just filling out the rest of the book, and there's well over 50 illustrations in the entire book. So like a quarter-page shot in here was here's a cigarette girl that kind of with the tray in front of them, with the straps that they would be selling cigarettes and cigars and things out of, matchbooks. But I had her selling a Tommy gun, and then there was some ad copy kind of making a big deal out of this is a Tommy gun. So, in this case, the cigarette girl is dressed skimpily by 1920 standards, of course, holding a tray with a neck strap. It's a waist-up shot. I just put a little reminder in here to Google cigarette girl, just in case my artist didn't know what a cigarette girl was. On the tray is a Tommy gun, and then some kind of details about that. And she's kind of smirking like, hey, look at, I'm selling this gun. And and then there's a ad copy that was to try the new Thompson submachine gun. It's the cat's meow, and then I defined it as a quarter-page piece and dimensions and TFI TIFF format and CMYK and so forth. That's about as detailed as I went. So I didn't define like what the dress specifically looked like. I didn't call for a particular ethnicity for the girl. I didn't call for a particular skin tone. There's like in these art orders, there's a number of spots where when there's multiple characters, I'll simply say vary the gender and ethnicity within the shot, just to get a variety, so that it's not just like a lot of white people, it's not a lot of men. So you have to just give thought to what you want it to represent. I wanted Capers to be a game that people could flip through and recognize somebody that looked like them. So I made sure to point out to not just have white dudes all over the place. Sometimes if there's some graphic information, some actual lettering that needs to go in there, I needed to define specifically for the easel sign. I needed to define kind of happy hour, what time it is, how much these different things cost, because I can't count on the artist to necessarily know that a beer during the 1920s cost a dime, which it did, or at least, in a lot of places it did. So provide that sort of information as well. Now, the front cover illustration is not in here because that was done earlier, but that particular illustration was the art order was more detailed. I got very specific, and when we went to the from sketch to line work and then from line work to color, I was a lot pickier because it's the front cover. That's the thing that most people are going to see first. So I put a little more effort, and I required actually a few kind of minor revisions even late in the phase of working on that particular illustration, and the artist worked with me on that. But for the most part, if you communicate your information well and you keep a good dialogue between yourself and the artist, you'll be able to go from sketch to line work to color with minimal revision. There might be just like kind of some things here and there. Like if she were to draw a car that didn't quite look 1920s enough for me, I might say, hey, let's change that car at the sketch level. Let's make that look a little more like this, and maybe provide an example, a photo pulled from online. That's the bulk of what this is about. Again, when you get into the process of dealing with the artist, giving these art orders to them, and then any other reference material you have, photos for periods or examples of artwork that you kind of like maybe try to do something kind of that evokes this kind of feel and look. You can provide those types of things, and then it's a question of being communicative and keeping a dialogue running. I try to make sure that, like, when I send feedback on the sketches, for example, I'll put a little blurb in my email saying, please drop me a quick line to let me know you got this, because sometimes something, the artist might receive the email and say, okay, I got that, and then it gets set aside because they're in the middle of something else, so they don't come back to it. And I don't know for sure that they've received it. I've had things go, accidentally get dumped into spam folders every so often. We've all run into that. So I just want to make sure that the communication is there, so that I know, like, okay, I've given her the feedback on this particular phase, and she's got it, and now I can sit back and I don't have to worry, like, okay, does she have questions? Maybe she, if she doesn't come back with questions right away, I assume she doesn't have any. But then again, she may not have actually looked at it in depth. So it's communication. Do the best you can to keep those channels open. Request that they ask questions to clarify. If you don't have enough information in a particular art order, they may ask for more. If some artists will look at an art order and assume no matter how little information is there, that's all you wanted to convey, so they will take more freedom with developing stuff. So you might have to hone your art order style a little bit as you go along. You might come to realize, well, I'm providing too much information, and the artist doesn't feel like they really get to create on their own. They're just painting by numbers, so to speak. Or I'm not giving them enough information, and they're kind of going in a very different direction, and I find myself having to correct things and talk to them and revise. So it becomes a question of just kind of taking a little time to figure out that what your style of art direction is. As I said, I try to make sure the artist just gets enough information to do what they're doing and then makes everything else their own. I don't dictate the style to them. I find an artist that does a style that I want and work from there. Although you can, sometimes say, hey, I really like the artwork that you do. I think you have great use of line work. I love your colors. I like, how you do faces and hands and whatever things it is you like, and say, but can you do things in a style a little bit more like this, or can you do something that's a little more like, and then give them an example of another piece of art or something. That's becomes a question of like what you think you can get from the artist. The more experienced the artist, the more likely they are to want to be, more comfortable they might be in branching out into doing different things. But keep in mind too, if you go to an artist and you ask them to do something that's kind of outside of their expertise, out of their style, that it's going to probably take them longer. That there may be more discussion back and forth between the two of you because they may not quite hit what you're looking for because you're getting out of their comfort zone. And frankly, you might have to pay them more because it's simply they're going to spend more time on it. And, artwork, while you're probably stating, like I'm basically stating this many dollars for this size of a piece of art. Really what you're doing is you're thinking, well, the artwork is this big and this complex, so it's going to take about this amount of time, and the artist is going to get paid, X dollars per hour for their work. But if you ask them to go outside of their comfort zone and try something very different, it's going to probably be a little more time consuming for them. So pay them appropriately, please. So, that's the basic rundown of art orders. I've got 4 or 5 art orders per page. This whole document is, with the contract, it says 16 pages long, but like I said, there was probably 50 art orders in here. So there's quite a variety of some of the art orders are very short. Like, boom, here's Al Capone. I even had a reference photo, so what I'm describing here is really just kind of recreating the reference photo. And then, in this case, special considerations. This is a good one. For these portraits that I did for Capers, they're in the book as kind of portraits of NPCs, but they're also going to be used as playing cards. They're going to be the face cards, the Jack, Queen, and King, for all 4 suits. So whenever I got, I had to decide who was going to be the King of Spades, who was going to be the Jack of Hearts, and so forth. So I made sure to kind of ask for, like with the spades, with the portraits that were going to be spades, try to have the colors be heavy on black with other colors skewing cool, so that when you're looking at the card, your clubs and spades cards tend to be darker colors, blacks and blues and purples and things like that, and then your hearts and diamonds tend to have reds and oranges in them. So if you look at those cards in the Capers deck, you'll see like there are where you see women in red dresses. It's because they're a red card, because they're a heart or a diamond. That was done very purposefully. That's about it. It'll take a little bit of time to kind of figure out how to convey the information that you want to convey and communicate. So do your best, work with the artist, and I'm sure everything will work out okay. That's your little lesson on art direction from NerdBurger Games, at least according to my particular experience. There are other ways to do it, I'm sure, and there are other art directors and creators who will say, no, I do it this way. Find your style, find your way of doing it, but this is how I do it. Until next time, bye-bye.